Now that's significant. The Market Research Podcast.
Hi everyone. Thanks for joining us on this latest episode of Now That's Significant, a market research podcast. This is your host Michael Howard, the head of marketing at InfoTools. Today we're joined by Wes Chaar, PhD. Wes began his career in aerospace engineering, contributing to the US Space Exploration Program and Mars missions. He introduced adaptive navigation systems using AI, machine learning, and genetic algorithms for deep space missions. Transitioning to business, he became an expert in analytics, data science, machine learning, and AI, driving innovations in industries like airlines, hospitality, retail, advertising, media, and CPG. Recognized with numerous accolades, including an Emmy for Engineering and Technology, the ANA Genius Award, the ARF Great Mind Award. Wes has also published extensively and presented at global conferences. It's a privilege, Wes. Thanks for joining us on the show.
I really appreciate the invite and the opportunity to talk with you and reach out to your audience. Good to meet you, Michael.
Thank you. So let's start the show how we always do by asking what the most significant thing that you're going to share with us today.
Well, the most significant thing that I'm going to share with you today is a new thinking about our personal data. A new approach regarding personal data where we shift, I'm going to call it the dynamic or the power dynamic from the data being owned, controlled by enterprise and corporation back into the individual themselves. This paradigm shift in my mind is key to preserve a number of things that I talk about in my book, privacy and hence freedom, and why actually this new paradigm offers not only protection for each individual and their freedoms, but also offers I'm going to call it a transparent, accountable, protected, equal, and respectful way on how you deal with data. So that's really the main thing that I would like to discuss with you and that I talked about in my book.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's something that I've thought about over the years as well. What happened if I guess the conversation or the relationship was flipped? What would that look like? And we're getting into a space where technology is enabling that or making that possible.
Well, I mean, the technology is there to have a solution. The question is, are enterprises and corporations who control our data willing to accept or to support such a paradigm, or is it simply too much power and too much money, and they will fight it all along the way? One thing that I would like always to tell people, or just some anecdotes, just if you think of the U.S. economy, we're something like roughly $24 trillion in economy. I ask people, do you know how many trillions of that is based on your personal data? I'm not talking about an engine that has an IoT that the company owes. No. I'm not talking about, of course we made a transaction with the company. They can analyze that transaction. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the 360 of every interaction and transaction that you do in your daily life is being tracked. How much does this data drive in terms of the US economy? I don't know if you want to take a guess. I will tell you it's in the trillions. So let me give you one example. Advertising, media, and marketing by itself in the United States, by itself, programmatic is roughly $600 billion. When you add everything else, connected TV and other, it's $975 billion. Let's call it a trillion. Advertising by itself in the US is $1 trillion. I'm not picking up on advertising. It's when you add the rest, then I may say CPG and retail. Will you say, well, aren't you going to count it's the advertising and you're maybe double dipping? No, that's not what I'm talking about. What are we talking about? How do you do product design? Well, product design understands 360 about the consumer. It's not looking only about your transaction. Supply chain optimization. Did you ever wonder where your package comes in 2 hours to your house? Why does your package come in the United States 2-3 hours or the next day or even the same day? It's because there is a deep analysis of consumer in a 360 that allows just-in-time supply optimization. So it allows you to have 3 copies of something or 2 verbatim because that is known based on your behavior. So the point is, when you add that, insurance, banking, it's actually more than $4 trillion before AI. Before AI. So that's what we're talking about. It's big amount of money that actually simply is your data. And then the issue in my mind is that complete knowledge of what we do 360, 24/7, has simply eroded our freedom. And I'm not, a person in my background. I'm really an engineer, a solutionizer at heart, and a scientist. I'm not interested in writing a dissertation about the problem. I prefer to write an abstract about the problem and a dissertation about the solution. So that's really the idea of the book. So how we can solve this? I'm not interested in, how do you say, demonizing X company and Y company. It's like, you know what? It is where we are. How do we go from here and then solve this problem?
So assuming there are 300 million people in the States?
330 million,
yeah.
335.
So $1 trillion divided by 330?
That's 1 trillion. We're talking 4 trillion, actually.
4 trillion, sorry. Yeah.
This is before AI.
Yes.
And that's 4 trillion of benefits that come to these companies. So the question, to your point, becomes, well, in an economy that's data hungry, correct? And with AI that is data hungry, why not the data becoming data of the people, by the people, for the people? I mean, it is their data after all, correct?
Yes.
So why not simply give back what I call the C3, consent, control, and currency of this data, your data, back in your hand, and you decide how to consent to it, to whom, how to control it, whether you allow or revoke in a very simple way. And then most importantly, too, is how its data is used. So to currency your data, it's a new verb, my new verb. To currency your data simply means is for which use cases it shall be used, and perhaps even the opportunity to monetize it.
Yes. Yep. And like you mentioned as well, the right to be forgotten. So
of course,
if you want to retract your data, then that has to come out of all of the models, of all of the data sources, etc. So
yeah. But the way I foresee it, it's a much simpler model. In the same way we take our money, correct, and we invest it with banks. And there are today data brokers, but the data brokers, we'll talk about that in a moment, what they follow or should be following, what they don't follow, and what they should be following. The idea is in the marketplace where you have this capability, where basically you go and to a broker that you say, you know what, that broker shares my value, my interest, whatever. I want to allow that broker to do this with my data, with the companies that they deal with, correct? You may not, want to deal perhaps with a broker who's dealing, I don't know, with Blood Diamond. You remember Blood Diamond, years ago, correct? So I don't want to deal with a broker who has that's at the value. You may be, I don't know, a person who believes in green economy, that's fine. And you may be another person who doesn't believe in green economy, but that's fine. But the idea is that you take your key and you decide with whom do you want to work with. And it could be more than one broker. And then those brokers, allow you to do the consent, the control, and the currency of your data. And then the marketplace, these companies that want your data, that's worth trillions of dollars for them, will have to compete for it. And in an economy, correct, where content also is growing, the value of content creation is growing. I was reading somewhere, I think it was by Shapiro, that the size of the content economy of content creation, that's, people who create content, videos, and this and that, is going to grow by 2030 to $600 billion in the United States. So imagine all this data, correct? So give it back to the people, let them whatever. It will drive more of the economy. It will drive, people in control and people feeling that they are respected and they can do really what they want to do with their personal data and really respecting their privacy and their freedoms.
Yes, that's a really great discussion to be having right now. So I thank you for joining us. So we mentioned and touched on your background. Can you tell us how that's all kind of weaved in and sort of led you to where you are right now?
Well, in aerospace or in engineering for that matter, you learn about systems, correct? And how one thing impacts things, correct, downstream, and how also what you're doing has been impacted by things coming, correct, upstream, correct? So you have this thinking of big systems and how things interact and work together. So where I am today, so when I moved to the business world, I didn't come with a mindset, oh, I'm just writing an algorithm correct and doing what I'm doing, or maybe today writing an API around it. I have, if you want to call it, that system view of things, that bigger view of how all these things interact and where are perhaps the pitfalls, the benefits, the things that you need to be watching out. So I think it's that system view of things that I learned from engineering that I bring into the business problems that I solve today.
Yeah, and just thinking about it as well, like as soon as you launch that ship and it's out going to its destination in space, there's no agile like thing test and learn, is there? Like it has to be in the box and ready to deal with whatever situation it faces.
Yeah, and then the way it happens in aerospace, typically, the every mission, since you're talking about that, is actually three component: the launch, the interplanetary navigation, and then the last thing is called EDL, entry, descent, and landing. So these are really the three major correct pieces of a space mission. I've always focused, when after the launch, then it becomes the interplanetary navigation. And for that, since we're talking about that, because you talked about that years ago, 25 years ago or whatever, Jet Propulsion Lab. I used to work for a lab called Center for Space Research in Texas, where we got funded from the Air Force, from Jet Propulsion Lab, and other places. But for Jet Propulsion Lab in particular, when I was working on this problem, the idea was the following: is that, to your point, there were like 20 engineers, and we don't have enough budget for 20 engineers anymore. And then you learn actually how these 20 engineers, were looking at data and calibrate the algorithms and try to figure out what's the best algorithm for the right maneuver at different touch point. And guess what? We got machine learning, where every algorithm is running under a different assumption. Machine learning will decide the right weightage or who is the best algorithm. But more importantly, there was a step where these algorithms, learn from each other and then create a new set of algorithms. So imagine algorithms learning from algorithms to create new capabilities. That's it was like, wow, we're not going to need 20 people. We may need 2 people or maybe 1. And that's really demonstrated to me in my career, the capability or what AI can do and what machine learning can do combined together. And, at that time in my mind, navigation is for space exploration and human, scientific quest. It's not impacting my daily life. But imagine when you have those capability over you as an individual, with your personal life, with the things that matter, with your privacy, with the things that concern your daily activities. Do you really want that? How much of that do you want? And there's no single answer. Some people want that completely. That's fine. And some may want none. And some maybe want something in between, correct? But the choice should be the individual choice. If we are, like we say in the United States, correct, a country that believes in freedom and democracy and human rights and all of that. So that's why I think there isn't really awareness of the depth of the situation. And I'm always, shocked that people have a little bit of inkling of what's going on, but not to the degree that it exists. And I think, whenever I bump into someone who read the book or is discussing the book with me, they're just shocked. They had no idea.
So this book that you've mentioned is called Data Independence.
Yes.
So I guess how we've touched on it briefly, but do you want to talk to how your background shaped the insights that are in the book?
That's, yeah, very good question. I started in the airline industry after aerospace. We're forecasting demand by segments. Then I did also hospitality and e-commerce. But then, as things evolved, I was in the advertising media marketing space, where data is even more granular and data explosion continued year over year over year. And then there was this, in the advertising media marketing, personalization is a big thing, correct? To basically develop personalized solution. But I think what really got me to write the book, eventually, not that day, is that aha moment that I had. And the aha moment was the following: thinking, oh, we can not only predict the behavior of this hashed ID, of course, because we don't use PII, but still, I called you Michael ABC123, whatever it is. But the point is, I know everything about ABC123. What if we can predict not only what type of message this person might react to positively, can we also predict their emotions? And it's called contextual audience ad scheduling with sentiment.
Wow.
And when I did that, and I remember going home the next day too, I was like, who am I? Who gave me the right? I mean, I know it's legal, it's whatever, but it doesn't feel right, correct? Because emotion is something so private, correct? How could you go with your algorithmic capabilities that are whatever, that becomes, I don't want to be part of that. Is this now manipulation, correct? Versus whatever. It creates a lot of question in my mind. Not that someone was trying to do that, but, or coming, oh, we want to manipulate. No, but it told me, what is missing is an education of the individuals across the country and across the world for that matter. So that's number one, what's missing. Number two, what's missing is an honest conversation of what businesses needed and what individuals should know and be transparent with them. And third, what is missing is actually a framework and a solution that addresses that and allows people to make their choices. So that's really what drove me. It's that aha moment in my career where I have realized the power. I mean, I've always realized the power of data, but it was even coming more and more and more to the point that it's like, something here really has to change. There's something that doesn't gel, as we say.
Well, I guess like advertisers and marketers have always known that kittens and babies elicit a certain response, but now there's data and there's technology that can go and start using that, which some would feel far more manipulative than in the past.
Yeah, I echo that, and I'll add also, especially now with generative AI, correct, coming on board. Do we want a world where technology is serving us, or do we want a world where we are serving technology? And this is really the fork in the road. And I think if a conversation doesn't happen and a movement around that, I think we may very well end up being a humanity that serves technology, not a technology that's serving humanity. I mean, I know the last time around when Silicon Valley told us, "Oh, trust us with your data, all the social platforms, blah blah blah." We know what we got, correct? Yeah, and that's the thing. It's not to demonize them. There's a lot of profit and there's a lot of things that, in innovation certainly that they do. But I think the companies that really adopt that and say, what, we are really about also the values that we care about in America, of freedom, of privacy, and of democracy, and of transparency, accountability, protection, equality, and respect, then what? I'm going to be the first. The company that will do that and say, what? I will approach the consumer with consent controlled currency so I can gain their trust and gain the most important, their primary data on their terms through a marketplace.
Yeah. But I mean, it's not necessarily just for countries like America. Like there may be some other forms of government that operate slightly differently that could still use that kind of approach, and it would then still be an opt-in for the consumer as well.
Sure, that is correct. It's not only for America, but obviously I've written it for an American, but I do put an international audience also in the book because everyone could benefit from that. Actually, if everyone does that, the world will be, in my opinion, a little freer. Because when people data vote, if you have that consent control currency, you can data vote. And guess what? You can influence industries and what they do because you're holding back your data or you're allowing your data, correct? And when you see in mass people maybe favoring particular policies and whatever, then industries will respond to the people. It could be, in my opinion, as powerful as our vote every 4 years. But this vote can happen anytime, depending on what you're reading and seeing in the marketplace.
Okay, so this vault key, this personal data vault key, which you introduce as a concept in your book, can you explain how it works and why you feel it's so revolutionary?
Number one, it's because it's a capability that can tie every interaction and transaction that you do. Today, companies do that, but they do it in a, how do you say, hodgepodge way. So let me explain. So let's just say you're a retailer. You may have the transaction that someone did at your retail store or online, correct? On your website or whatever might be the case, or on your app. But what typically happens, then the retailer, or for now I'm picking on a retailer, but they're not the only one. Insurance company, banks, everyone. What they end up doing from that gateway, having your email address and some transactions, is that they start talking to other companies, correct? To collect what they have and eventually complete that dossier, the digital dossier of Michael, correct? The digital dossier of Wes, the 360 dossier. Well, the thing is, they're doing this connection in a hodgepodge, and it's pretty not always 100% accurate. So this is more a transparent way that says there is a technology, and there are. I'm not suggesting that there is only one, but for example, not the only one. Blockchain could be one of them, correct? That can tie. So why is that revolution? Number one, it is in your control. You can decide in the marketplace who can use it, not use it. But also, because it is in your control, and for example, with a technology like blockchain, it allows you a number of things like authentication, correct? Is this really Wes's data or is it someone else's data? Is it traceable, correct? Because you hear a lot about data fraud, correct? And data poisoning and other data. So it solves a lot of the issues that how do you say, that we suffer from today and that you hear about every day in the news. It is in your control, authenticated, traceable, you consent, you control, and you currency, all of them. The book is not a technical book, so it doesn't have necessarily the technical design, but I would say I am working with a couple of friends of mine, and we hope we have a solution in the next few months that we'll announce at some point. So we're really looking forward to making data independence unlocked. So unlocking data independence is coming next, I hope.
Well, what I really like about the idea is that you can then have almost like an Uber, a rating sort of portion of it as well. So you're really careful on who you give your data to and who you don't. But then those companies you give it to can also rate you as well. And so there's a lot of issues around data quality, survey fraud, etc.
Sure.
If you've got a 4.95 rating with your vault key, companies are going to be able to trust you.
Yeah.
And therefore, the higher the trust, the higher the value back to you as a consumer.
Exactly. And then they'll say also the quality of the content and the data would also drive, because the data is not only the interaction transaction, but the interaction could also include all the content that you're creating and how much the market values it, correct? Brands could value, you obviously hear about influencers and the content that they create and how much it's actually valued, correct, by brand and advertisers and retailers and various other companies. So to your point, it is both and the quality of the content, yes.
So can you elaborate on this concept and what its implications are for the market research industry?
For the market research industry, there's a bunch of things going on today. You hear about synthetic data for one thing, and I'm really a little concerned for marketers using the synthetic data and how much is it really true human insights versus make believe almost of whatever. So for market researchers, I think honestly, in my opinion, there is really a big opportunity today, actually a gateway for them to really be the leader in owning that relationship actually with consumers and having really created that paradigm. No one else than marketers understand the value of data, correct? Knows how to use this data. But for them to open that up actually will break, in my personal opinion, the hold of the big tech companies on that and would allow them actually the relationship that people want with their marketers. Why not the marketers, to your point, become actually those data brokers in an open way that follows those consent, control, and currency. That will be actually not a hindrance, correct, to what they do today, but actually, so if you think of marketers, they're doing personalization. Imagine in such a world, they will be doing hyper personalization in a completely open, transparent way with the okay of consumers and individuals.
That's right. That's an interesting concept. So, can you think of any other principles of consent control and currency that might be able to empower individuals whilst also, I guess, transforming this data economy that we're speaking of?
Uh, Other what? I'm sorry.
Principles.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. So the other principle I alluded them to earlier. So it's not really about just concern control currency, because when you trust correct your data to an entity, those broker or those marketers that you just talked about, well, what is the principles that have to go along with that? Correct. So let me switch here a little bit. When you trust your money to a bank or to Wall Street, in the United States, we have something called the SEC, the Security and Exchange Commission. I mean, what does the SEC does? The SEC protects, correct, our monetary assets from ill use by someone on Wall Street or by some scammer or some pyramid scheme, correct? So that's really the role of the SEC. So what is really the SEC doing? Although they don't use that acronym, they're ensuring transparency, accountability, protection, equality of respect. Similarly, with your data, with the C3 framework that I described, it cannot work alone without transparency, accountability, protection, equality, and respect by the people you entrusted. So I foresee in my mind, when you think about your data, the data is driving trade, correct? And the United States in particular, the Federal and Trade Commission, the FTC, what we call the FTC in our country, try to deal with data issues and trade issues and commerce issues, correct? But what the way they're doing it, they're not necessarily thinking it in this century or even late last century's perspective and data. They're still using old laws and fighting in courts or whatever. I think in my mind, the approach should be give back the data to the people, let them decide. Let me be as a Federal Trade Commission, like the SEC. Hopefully it will be called the Federal Data and Trade Commission, FDTC, protect people's data and how companies are using it, and decide who can actually be owning or be, a host of their data or a sponsor of their data or a user of data, whatever you want to call it. Whoever the FDTC will decide that have to follow these principles. So C3 in my mind doesn't work without TAPER. Uncle Harold cannot start a data business out of his garage saying, I follow C3. No, you cannot do that. So it has to be followed with this taper principle that I call.
Well, in one sense, though, the blurred line between digital and real life is only going to get more blurred. So the FTC could well just pivot and include, but that's a big task. So the
Yes.
FDTC might be an easier
Yeah,
way forward.
exactly. So, I mean, the one thing I'll mention, Michael, I know I wrote a book and I'm excited about it, and people who have read it, are providing, good feedback and have a lot of interest and questions. But also, I'm not, in my mind, sitting in Dallas, Texas, thinking because I wrote the book, a policymaker, I'm going to get up one day and do the right thing. Although I'm trying to reach out to a bunch of senators, I'll give credit to the staff of one senator who replied. I reached out to three. Senator Fetterman, if you hear this, thank you for your staff for at least replying, saying we're busy now, but maybe later, or something along those lines. So I'll give them credit for that. But the other way that I was going to mention, this issue of data, consent control currency even exists between businesses. Actually, when companies even push their data to another business, they're not sure if it got deleted and whatever. So the approach I'm taking with my friends who are building this technology is to make this technology available between two businesses, any business. And if we make it available between businesses, and on top of it, we're making that solution also quantum safe in a world where quantum computing is around the corner, correct? And you hear the stories about hackers and people at universities. There was one story, not to pick on China, but I can't remember which university, where they said they broke quantum encryption using quantum computing. Okay, well, hackers are obviously collecting data today so that they can break encryption later. But going back to what we're doing a solution that is B2B, that has the C3 components that we talked about, but also that's quantum safe. And my hope is that then individual will say, because eventually, if nothing happened at the individual level, we're going to have an issue. I'm pretty sure something is going to make the news, but hopefully we won't get to that. But the point is, maybe people will say, you know what? Why don't I have the same protection that businesses have between them, correct? with my data, and they will ask for the same technology to be provided to them. So this is the approach we're taking. In our conversation, actually, we've had so far with businesses, there is a need for that. They know that they need that. So if we can get, hopefully in a few months, once we finish the development of the solution, like an alpha partner, then hopefully we will obviously advertise that and people would know about it. And hopefully eventually people will say, well, I want the same protection that banks have. I want the same protection that big tech has. I want the same protection that, X enterprise has. It is my data, and it will be the same solution that we can even provide for individuals.
So thinking about market researchers again, what role can they play in advancing this transparency, accountability, and protection that you're advocating for?
I would love to see market researchers that will move from if you want to call it extracting data from various whatever to more a proactive engagement with consumers directly, and be actually like the stewards of this data, rather than this data being collected from whatever. Let them be, in my mind, the data brokers. Rather than doing, we do data surveys, correct? Don't you do surveys as a marketer here and there? Why not be basically open about how much data that you want and really make it a platform? Maybe you can create a platform where people can interact with that, but also bring their data, start with that. I haven't seen that. I mean, I know agencies, maybe collect a survey here, a survey there. Retailers have some data, and everyone tries to patch this data. You're familiar, obviously, with clean rooms and how this whole thing, happens in clean rooms. But why not a marketer that takes a new model and approach to the market space? I would love to participate in something like that with a marketer with a vision of openness.
Yes. So AI-generated data and synthetic responses are perceived as both areas of opportunity, but also growing concerns with market researchers. How do you see us addressing their concerns?
Well, the issue with that is that AI-generated data and synthetic responses, correct, they pose, in my mind, unique challenges because they blur the line between, what shall I call it, authentic human insights and what do you want to call it, manufactured content.
Yeah,
that's the problem. So to address this, I mean, we can create more governance systems, mechanism that trace maybe the origin of the data, but we're still putting patches around the fundamental issue, which is give back the data to its people, let them make their decision. I mean, we can put governance, we can put traceability requirements and this and that, but it still doesn't resolve the fundamental problem, which is it really your data or the entity's data? I don't think just because I bought a bottle of water at the grocery store, someone should know everything that happens around my house 24/7. I don't think people even realize, how everything is connected. Just because you bought that bottle of water and you get that 360, that you even probably have information of what you're watching on your TV, what you even said on your TV. A friend of mine sent me, someone who said a joke, which is really funny, if you don't mind. I guess a husband and a wife were talking very softly, and then the wife asked, "Why are you talking so softly?" He said, "I don't want Mark Zuckerberg to hear us." He had like his Facebook. And then he laughed, she laughed, and then he laughed. And then Alexa laughed, and then Siri laughed. The point of this is that they realize it's everywhere. It's everywhere. I mean, very well in terms of marketing, for example, attention metrics, correct, are important. Some companies and technologies, and I put that in the book, not to pick on anyone, but one of them in very particular, one of the bigger ones, have technology now where in TV, how much you're watching and how much you paid attention. I mean, but if people know all of this, say, you know what, this is too much. I came to my house, I bought a chocolate bar, I went and transacted in my bank. I don't need to be monitored 24/7 because we did that, correct? That's basically a surveillance system. This is what I call 1984, but with soft shackles. It's a soft form of shackles, a soft totalitarianism. And when people realize that, they say, you know what, we want something different. We want to decide where we are on that spectrum. So back to your question also, I'm not a big fan of synthetic data because of the anomalies and the whole mixing of human insight and algorithmically manufactured in by my sense content. It's not really authentic human insights.
Yeah. So if we think about Gen Alpha, so young kids, children these days, they're growing up in a digitally native world,
Correct.
a term of the past.
Yes.
But they're used to a level of privacy and openness that we're not. And so it's just what they're used to these days. So how do you think they're going to react
I,
to initiatives like
that's
this?
I love this question. Okay, so I talked to my kids, and to your point, they had this. But when I talked to them about the value of the data, guess what? They became very interested.
Yes.
Because guess what? I remember years ago, one of my kids, my son Gregory, he said, "Oh, I want to be a YouTube influencer." Years ago, I was like, "What is that?" Or an influencer, or YouTube, or whatever. It's like I didn't even. It's like, but they told me, and I started watching them and listening to them. Were their generation. But when I talked to them about the value of their data, they all realize, oh no, I would like to be in control of it. Yes, I want whatever, but I need something for it. So if to your point, they understand the niceties and the things that they love in terms of conveniences, but when for them they realize that it has an intrinsic value and etc. They said, you know what, I want to be able to do that. Actually, in the book, it's funny you asked this question. I introduced 5 characters of different parts of life just to tie it to our daily life so people can relate a little bit. So, oh, yeah, that sounds like me. Oh, it sounds like someone I know. And one of them was like someone who was 16-year-old, hypothetically in the book. Her name was Kara, Kara. And by the time, all of this gets implemented, she's 18. She decides to take her PDVK and invest it. And because she was active, and I give an example, because her content, back to what you said, Michael, was better content, highly rated, blah, blah, blah. And also, if you think, 4%, it accounts for inflation, 4%, it has to be above the 7% return of an S&P. It is not far-fetched that at 18 and by the time you're 68 and retire in the United States, that data hypothetically for that one example of good rating, the thing that you just said, could be worth more than $10 million. This is not something, unheard of. So to your point, when people realize my data has value and I want to be active with it or not active with it, whatever might be the case, but I am in consent and control and currency of my data. So in that, the discussion that I had with this current generation, like my kids and their friends, at least within the ensemble of the people I know within my circles, it's the currency piece of how it's used, because they care about particular topics for them, social issues that are very important with them. And they realize actually that sometimes our data are used for something completely different than their beliefs. So that's number one. And number two, when they understand the value of their data, use cases and value, that actually they are open for the approach. But that's actually the two things that made them, no, I would really like that. And that's why.
I mean, it sounds like a really fascinating, well, I guess hard to get your head around how PII, so personal identifier information, can still maintain when companies are still able to have this kind of two-way and get so much information about people, etc. as well. How do you envisage being able to balance that privacy, I guess, with the insights?
Yeah, but let's talk about it. The way today it's happening, we want to protect the consumer, we're not going to use your name and whatever. But what happens, and you're familiar with it, one typical technique is to say, we're hashing this data. I mean, hashing the data, what does it mean? It says, we're not going to call you Wes Chaar. We're going to, at some point in the process, create a string of, depending on the algorithm, some random string that says, it's ABC123 XYZ, whatever. I mean, let's have an intelligent and transparent conversation. Because if you call me that string and another entity calls me, is using the same hashing algorithm, then they tie the dossier and suddenly you have the 360. But then everyone can say, we didn't break any law, we didn't use whatever. But we're all playing these games. In this new approach, I don't want you to call me a random string. I gave you consent, control, and courtesy. You can call me Wes, and you can reach out to me. This is the thing that we're beating around because no one wants to have that honest conversation. And we're creating these hodgepodge, if you want to call it, set of laws, which only address the most recent crisis du jour, correct? You have a crisis du jour that makes it whatever. Then you have all the politicians, whatever, and they go, and the lobbyists figuring out a solution that addresses the PR issue that blew up. And then, while at the same time safeguarding the trillions of dollars going to these companies until the next PR issue. What is simply missing? Treat every individual with respect, let them own it, and let people decide. There is nothing more empowering than data ownership to further empower freedom and democracy and privacy. That doesn't help. And the company that really has, in my mind, that foresight, such as marketers, which I hope will be the marketers, beating everyone up and really coming to the front of that, will really transform things in an incredible way and will break those walled gardens, correct, that companies have of our data and that they hold very tight. And if that happens today and everything changes because someone asked me this question, well, don't they have your data from the past? Yeah, they have it from the past. Let's just say it starts today. But the data is temporal. What's interested in is the data changes in time. So even if they have the past, if they want to participate in the future, they have to join the movement.
Yeah. No, very nice. So I think we've almost covered everything. I guess one thing we haven't necessarily touched on is the whole monetizing of people's data. So this is so individuals like myself making how can researchers and marketers adapt to this idea that consumers themselves are monetizing their own data?
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that. Today, when a marketer constructs an audience, I mean, they're paying for that data from wherever they got it. So it's not like they're not paying for it today. You mentioned something I really liked earlier about the quality and the content and the value of this data. Not all data is equal. So I'll give you that. So they're probably willing to pay more money for what they know is authentically high valued prime data versus data that, it's like, yeah, but it's not worth that, whatever that costs. Because of this openness, not only do you know that actually the data is traceable, authenticated, etc., and true, as a marketer, if you want to do something, let's just say, so hyper-personalized, but you also understand the value of it and how much you're willing to pay for it if you're working with a brand, or if you're working with a retailer, if you're working with an insurance company, whoever you're working with, correct? So it's that openness that allows you to understand the value of that asset clearly and openly. And you decide, what it's worth. It's actually a good thing, because I don't think all data is equal, as you have, done in marketing. And not only that, because of this openness, you can authenticate. You don't have this fraud, correct? You don't have these many issues that happen in advertising and other industries because of that authentication at this PDVK. So all of these are resolved. It's an open, transparent place where you can actually bid on what you want to bid or buy what you want to buy in an open marketplace.
One thing that I can see market research is having to adapt is actually being far more consumer centric, because they're having to then pay for these more high value or low value, depending on what they're looking for. They're going to be far more particular in what they're actually asking, and only asking for what they're actually needing. So
you just gave me an idea.
Yeah.
We talked about C3, consent control currency. You know what you came up with, Michael? C4, customer first, consent control currency. That's what should be the marketing. Customer first, and then consent control currency. Yeah, because they have, to your point, to be customer centric.
Yeah.
Customer centric, and then consent control currency.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nice. Well, if you were to think about one final takeaway from your book that you hope our listeners, as market researchers, will implement, what would that be?
I want them to be part of a solution where they are the leader of a solution where technology is serving humanity, and not we end up marketers participating in solutions where humanity is serving technology. Marketers care about a lot of things. Let them own this topic. let them be pioneer in putting something new, and let them really be the champion of where technology serves humanity, where marketers serve humanity, where marketer drives technology to serve humanity. We are not marketers that will use you to serve our technology or whatever. And I think the marketer that puts that value proposition, it will resonate with people. You want to be correct, served by technology. You do not want to be the server of AI. You do not want to be server of technology or entities. I think those marketers that have that message will earn incredible trust. And those who will develop that first platform with that mindset will be the winners, I hope. And if not, we're building that solution B2B. We're bringing it to individuals after that, I hope.
Yeah. Top down, bottom up.
Yes. It's so funny you said that, because I was asked the question. I said, it can be just top down, talking top down to your point. But with policymakers, there is another level of top down. You're correct, Michael. Is that business to business? And the bottom up is that's exactly what we're doing. So join the movement, Michael.
Yeah, I'm going to be following it closely. Don't worry.
Yes. When we have an announcement, I'll make sure I'll drop you a note.
Thank you, kindly. Well, thank you so much, Wes. It's been a really fascinating conversation today, and I'm sure our listeners will have lots to think about and to speak to with their peers and their organizations as well.
Thank you so much for your time today. I hope it's not too late for you in the day in New Zealand. And very good talking to you and to your audience. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. For our listeners out there, thank you for joining us too. As with every episode, if you haven't already, we'd appreciate it if you subscribe to the podcast, share it with others, or left a review. Until next time, thanks for listening to Now That's Significant.